All right, welcome to another edition of the 24th Floor. It might be basketball season, but football still keeps finding its way into the highlights and the limelight. Since high school sports is a big part of what we're doing here at ABC 24, we got to talk about high school football across the Mid-South and how it's changing.
Yes, top players are moving schools. 2026 is already shaping up to be one of the most impactful transfer cycles we've seen. So we're bringing in the guy who tracks this better than anyone. In fact, he's been called oftentimes the Adam Schefter of the prep world. So welcome again to the program, a frequent friend, Mr. John Varlas of the Daily Memphian. Welcome back, sir.
I appreciate that a lot, Richard.
Yes.
I've never... Who calls me that?
Remember, I saw that on Twitter. Okay. You remember he saw that on Twitter.
I appreciate that
That's
a lot.
a new thing.
I'm thankful that my last appearance went so well that you guys thought to have me back. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you both very much.
You know, when I'm out here in these streets covering these games, I always have to make sure I say hello to you.
Always glad to help you, my friend.
So, John, I started following your Twitter pretty extensively because I couldn't keep up with all the transfers. And that's what we wanted to talk about for the most part today was, hey, so I think it's always best to start at the beginning. Yeah. Can we explain to the people at home who maybe don't understand or don't know what are the rules for high school kids to transfer?
Well, and for that, I think we got to give it a little bit of context. So to take it back to last year, the TSSAA Board of Control, there was some talk of some legislators not from the Memphis area, East Tennessee, I believe they were based in. There was talk of them, not, I don't want to say threats, but there was just talk that, they might force the TSSAA's hand into loosening up the state transfer restrictions, player empowerment, all this, trying to make it more like college, and we don't have enough time to get into why high school shouldn't be like college. We don't have enough time to get into that. But in response to that, the TSSAA, and I think it was in March of 2025, passed the current transfer rule, which is now in place, which states essentially that an athlete can transfer schools, basically no questions asked, as long as they're transferring for non-athletic reasons. Could be academic, could be social, could be mental well-being, could be, family moved or family financial circumstances. It could be a myriad number of reasons other than athletics. and that's where, it gets interesting because, some of these players are great athletes, and they may end up finding their way to schools that need a certain position or whatever. But my position is, I was telling you off the air, Ruben, that as long as it's signed off, as long as the TSSAA in both schools, the principal at the originating school signs off on the transfer, as long as he or she does that, then the transfer is good and we're good to go. So. Again, we can always kind of have one eyebrow up at some of these moves, but as long as everyone signs off on it, that's where I am on that.
So we've got a full screen where we talk about some of the transfers that kind of stuck out to us. For me, I want to start with right here at the top, Shelby Clark, which I have to always pay attention and not say Shelby Clark, especially since we're in Shelby County. He's going from Bartlett to Germantown. And he's a guy who's an all-state linebacker, massive production for Bartlett, immediate defense difference maker, and a tone setter. Is this the type of move, John, that changes Germantown's ceiling right away, especially when you talk about the season that they just had where they were arguably one of our better teams in the area?
It certainly bolsters their linebacking core and their defense in general, because you got to remember, too, in addition to Shelby, they're bringing back Peyton Ballard, another class of 2027 linebacker kid who I really liked as well. The defensive coordinator over there at Germantown, Coach Harmon. He compared Peyton very favorably to some of the great linebackers he coached when he was at Whitehaven. Guys like Aubrey Miller and those type of guys. So they already had one outstanding linebacker, and now, like you say, they've added an all-state kid. Shelby picked up an offer from Memphis a couple of days ago. He's been offered by Florida State. He's been offered by Vanderbilt. So already some big schools, some good schools getting in on him. So certainly gives him a very, very good linebacker core there at Germantown.
Now, I don't want to get too much off topic with the transfer thing, but when we look at Germantown, obviously we look at what's been going on in the coaching world in high school, and we're going to touch on that with Melrose in just a second. Obviously, Coach Rodney Salisbury left Whitehaven. Legendary coach leaves after 22 years to go to U of M. Now there's an opening for the head coach. And obviously the Germantown head coach is Gene Robinson, who we've had on this program.
Whitehaven alum.
Do you think that Gene could jump to Whitehaven?
No, because he told, I mean.
Hey, it would make sense in the world. He's an alum.
It would make.
He's Whitehaven through and through.
It would make sense in the world, but there was things had kind of heated up a few days ago, and I texted him and I said, Coach, are you planning on? And he was unequivocal. He said, I'm staying at Germantown. So,
okay.
So
respect it.
Unless something,
either way, I would have respected his decision.
Unless something has changed within the last few days, which I don't think it has. Coach Gene's been welcoming in a lot of the college coaches there at Germantown here in the last few days, and like you just said, he's got Shelby Clark coming over, and who knows who else might find their way to Germantown. But no, I think he's going to stay there. Certainly, they should have some good candidates for the Whitehaven job. Lots of alums out there in coaching that have done really well for themselves. So they'll end up with a good coach, but I really, really don't think it's going to be Gene.
Yeah, let's take a look back at that full screen with some of those other names, because let's go through some of these kind of on, we'll say rapid fire for lack of a better way to do it. One of the ones initially that surprised me was Thomas Hefner leaving Melrose to go to Los Angeles, but then the coaches from Melrose end up having to leave, which we'll touch base on there. Talk about what kind of impact you think Thomas Hefner can have at Los Angeles.
I think he's gonna have a huge impact. Ruben, you're talking about a kid who was a Mr. Football runner-up this past year. Great numbers there at Melrose. I
watched him play. That dude can do it all.
One of the most complete quarterbacks in the area.
He can, and he's
just a sophomore.
Just a sophomore. He picked up an offer from Arizona State the other day. And the thing with Thomas that I don't think a lot of people remember, they forget. His dad was a quarterback, so he's the son of a quarterback. He's been kind of raised and trained and molded to be a quarterback. So he's smart, he's cerebral, in addition to being a really good football player. And I think he's going to fit in well at Lausanne. They're losing T.J. Jenkins. So I think Thomas is going to step right in there on the field. Academically, too, I think he's going to be a great fit. Thomas wants to study engineering in college. He's a really smart kid. He's been to engineering camp at Georgia Tech. So he's a high-level brain in addition to a high-level football player. So I think he's going to fit in very well on and off the field over there.
And that's crazy because he's going from Melrose, a public school in Orange Mound, my home neighborhood here in Memphis, going to one of the more prominent private schools in the area. So when I saw that he was transferring from that to that, it just caught my attention. Now, staying on Melrose, how much were you surprised about the Morrow twins stepping down? Now, I've reached out to them, and I haven't been able to really get a lot of correspondence on it. So we're still trying to figure out what is going on. Yeah. What do you know from that situation?
I suspect it was a case where, and I don't want to say too much, but I suspect it was a case where they were maybe bumping heads a little bit with the administration. And maybe them and the administration weren't on the same page. I don't want to say who was right and who was wrong in those things because I don't know. Yeah. But I will say that the Morrow twins, in the 2 years they were there, they did a fantastic job. They reignited that Orange Mound community. They brought pride back to that community, to the football program. They brought excitement back. I mean, they did a tremendous job. They're high energy guys, really high character guys, in my opinion, and I hate to see them go. Hopefully hopefully they'll stay in coaching in some capacity. But
could they end up at the Haven?
Well, I don't.
That would be interesting.
There's no ties there that I know of.
But Melrose and Whitehaven are so kind of similar to me in like their style of play, and then that crowd and that environment. Whitehaven obviously is bigger. Yeah. I could see it. I always liked the Morrow twins about how they have the co-head coaches. It wasn't just like one guy to do it. Because in situations like that, it'll be like, okay, I'll be the head coach and you'll be my coordinator. Yeah. But they both did everything lock and step. And like you said, 21-6 in 2 seasons, playoff appearances, scratching at the door of winning it all. They obviously made it to the championship game in their first year, and in the second year got beat in the semifinals. It kind of hurt me, just not obviously because my ties to the Orange Mound area. But when I saw the news, it's kind of hurt. And so I hope that Melrose doesn't take a step back, especially now that they lost Hefner.
Yeah, and I don't know what direction Melrose is looking now. But going back to the twins, the thing I respect about those guys the most is, when I first met them, I went out and interviewed them the summer of leading into their first season, and they said, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to bring back the pride. We're going to win. We're going to. And they did it.
Yeah.
You know,
all those things.
you guys know. You talk to a lot of people that say, "I'm going to do this," and they never do it.
Yeah.
These guys produced. They backed up everything.
Sam Pittman.
Sam Pittman out here catching strays.
Yeah, Sam Pittman catch some strays. But you're right about the moral twins.
Totally respect them for doing everything they said they did, and like I said, just bringing that program back and that pride back to that community.
So let's get back to the list, because I do want to make a point here, and I'd love to get your opinion on it. When you look at the list of kids some of the kids who are transferring, obviously we talked about Hefner. There's also a kid who's transferred, Braden Washington, from White Station to Collierville. Now, stick with me on this one.
Lineman.
I think yesterday he picked up another offer. Maybe picked up an offer from Sanford or something like that. And then you've got, help me out, the running back.
Larry Johnson.
Larry Johnson III transfers, picks up an offer. Am I out of bounds? And I know I'm not, but I want you to go ahead and say, but am I out of bounds to say that these kids, these parents, are transferring to schools where they see the opportunity for them to play at the next level?
Yes and no. I mean, in the case with in the case of Larry Johnson and Braden Washington, they each had offers at their previous school. I mean, Larry had offers at Germantown.
Yeah. So don't finish that thought yet. Here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to back that up. When social media wise, when you go to like Collierville, all you see is Ranconi with college coaches. Germantown, you see Gene with college coaches. And I think the perception becomes, which is probably the better way for to say it, the perception becomes, let me go to those schools.
Go there so I can
because
get more
they're
of the spotlight.
always talking to coaches, even though I might have an offer, to your point, at the school I was already at.
And that's fair. I mean, it's hard to know what's important to all these parents without being there in the kitchen and everything with them. But yeah, certainly a school like Collierville. I mean, they got like Tay Walden, for example. He's already at Collierville, and there's going to be,
Tons of coaches
numerous coaches coming in just to look at Tay Walden. I mean, they were, coming in last year to look at some of the guys, Lawrence Autry and some of the guys Collierville had last year. So having those guys around and then, being there and maybe, I don't want to say, catching the leftovers, but just being there in the same building and it's like, well, maybe I don't need this guy, but coach, we got a lineman here. We
that's
got, that's how it works.
That's exactly how it happens.
Absolutely. So yeah, and it's interesting too. Lawrence Autry graduates, so now they got a ready-made running back in Larry Johnson. Braden Washington's going to certainly help out on that line. You can't coach 6'5" and almost
Size.
300 pounds like he is. So,
Rich, what's your thoughts?
Really good pickup.
So first, I saw your tweet about how the Southwind Collierville game was probably like one of the highest grossing gates here in the area.
In 6A around the state.
And that is incredible because you look at whoever wins that game has an opportunity to go and be one game away from playing for it all. So we talk about Collierville on this side, but let's flip on the other coin who ended up winning that game, which was Southwind.
And who has got plenty of transfers on their own.
Exactly, and they reloaded. What they did was they added a pair of running backs. They added Jeremiah Taylor, I believe the name, from Germantown, and then they added Kamani Williams from NBA. And then, of course, they went and got some DB help. So obviously Southwind, a lot of everything was talk about Perkins, and now he's going to be out. But is Southwind quietly becoming one of the most dangerous rosters in the city in rebuilding after Perkins?
Well, it's interesting. I was at the Southwind basketball game last night, and I ran into Antonio Kiefer, their great offensive lineman over there, and I always talk to Antonio whenever I see him because he's such a great kid. I said, how's the team looking? And he was really excited, about as excited as you can be considering you just lost the best program in the history of the school and one of the best players in the history of the city, in Kelvin Perkins. But yeah, I mean, talking about offers with Ruben, Kamani Williams is a kid who's, probably already has 20, 25, major college offers. He's got offers from both of the teams that played in the national championship game, Indiana, Miami, several other SEC schools and Power Fours. So he's going to really help them. I mean, when you think about Southwind, the question is, who's going to play quarterback next year? And Malcolm Jack from Kirby, who is a talented kid, a good, strong-armed kid. He's made his way over there to Kirby, so I think he'll probably be the starter. And we'll see how it goes. It's going to certainly be a different team next year, but Antonio's excited, so
so you're going to be excited for
I'm going to go with that.
I like how Southwind, it feels like they're going to change their identity to not be so reliant on the QB play, because when I saw that they were able to pick up both of these running backs, and I know Ruben and I have talked about it on the Memphis college football side, it's not necessarily now where you just need one running back to do it. So you can kind of like rotate them in, and there doesn't necessarily have to be a bell cow. Because both of these guys are really good in their own right. And so I think now you'll see a more like in the trenches, run through the tackles, what Southwind is doing, instead of having that quarterback, because they lost Perkins, who will be able to kind of air it out and keep the defense on it.
And the thing about Southwind, too, I mean, the strongest part of their team is that offensive line.
Yeah, that line is tough.
They were all juniors last year.
Man.
The U-Haul boys, they'll move you down the field. Antonio Kiefer, Chris Campbell, Zacchaeus Ratliff. I mean, those guys are really, really good.
Huge.
They'll all be back. And they're huge, no doubt about it. They'll all be back for their senior year, barring anything unforeseen. So, yeah, if you've got guys like that and a couple of good running backs, totally makes sense to kind of switch your approach a little bit.
Talking about potentially switching your approach as well, Briarcrest gets a new quarterback.
Yeah.
And
coming back home.
Yeah, so Hudson Tucker. Yeah, Hudson
Graduates.
Tucker, very much pocket passer.
Yeah.
Very much sits in that pocket and picks people apart. But now Caden Dixon coming back to the area.
Father Ryan in Nashville.
What do you think about that potentially making a move for Briarcrest?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting with Briarcrest, especially in that large private school division here in locally with Christian Brothers and MUS. We see with MUS they've lost several guys, and I think that might hurt them. Christian Brothers, obviously, they'll have Nate Brick at quarterback
that kid
next year.
Is
and
good.
Had a conversation about him at the basketball game.
He broke his foot.
Week. He did. He's out right now, and none of my business. But if
no more basketball, Mom and Dad.
If I was the football coach, if I was Coach McDaniel over there, I'd say that's exactly what I. But again, none of my business. He can do what he wants.
I'm under the impression the brother only plays baseball because of a similar situation. Right? Didn't want to risk the base because he's a first-round draft pick kind of kid.
He's going to be really good, and Will is actually graduating early, so this is he reclassified, so this is actually his last season of high school ball coming up this spring. But yeah, I always advocate play as many sports as you can, but in this case, I would.
Hey, you're on this earth to sling that thing, bro.
That's me. Again, none of my concern. You do what you want.
But it definitely mixes things up, don't you think?
Yeah. So John, I gotta ask you, when you look at these transfers, how much of this movement starts at the quarterback and then trickles down?
It's interesting because a lot of kids, if you have a good quarterback, I think that might draw other kids to your program. I mean, if you're a wide receiver, maybe, and we saw that with Kelvin Perkins over the last couple of years. Because Southwind basically replaced their receiver core. From 2023 to 2024, and then again from 2024 to 2025, it was basically a whole new group of receivers each year because
they wanted to play with
Kelvin Perkins, and why wouldn't you? So yeah, I think a lot of it is driven from the quarterback position. Ruben made a great point too about offers and real or perceived. That certainly plays a lot into it as well. But a lot of it, honestly, Richard, is just who's the hot program right now? Who's the sexy program? And right now, that's Southwind. That's Collierville with the great facilities they have and the success they've had recently.
To your point, I've been the sexy program for about 40-something years.
Well, clearly.
So I can only hold that mantle for so long.
Yeah, well,
at some point, somebody else is going to have to take it.
Yeah, Southwind's taking it.
So you're right. So full disclosure, I'm a football dad. Yeah. I'm a sports dad. My kids are athletes.
It's at Arlington. You got your kids at Arlington.
They better get a line and some receivers. Is all
I was just going to say, are you going to have your kids be hitting the portal when that time comes?
Get a line and some receivers. No, but on a serious note, we as parents, we look and see, how programs are progressing, who's investing in their football, which towns and cities and schools are serious about the sports that your kids play. So I don't think you're out of bounds to say that's a determining factor as a person looking to say, okay, where do we go now? Yeah, Collierville and Southwind are sexy right now, but if I'm a running back, or my offensive lineman, and I want to be able to run block and show that I can do that to get to the next level, I'm going to go somewhere where they run that ball a lot.
Like Whitehaven.
Yeah.
Because Christopher Talley, he was running that thing.
He was, and shout out to Rod Lucas, the quarterback at Arlington. He's a very good one. But to your point, Ruben, and I think this is a problem that the private schools are starting to deal with. you look at a place like Collierville, like Bartlett, like Houston. Some of these parents are saying, well, the facilities are every bit as good here, and we don't have to pay tuition.
Yeah.
So that's a problem that some of these private schools are. I know for a fact that they're really starting to grapple with it. I don't know if it's going to change the way they do things. I hope it's not, because the mission of the school is always important, first and foremost. But it's a problem when it comes to athletics. It really is.
Is that where scholarship opportunities might have to come into play?
Yeah, and that's always been a part of it, scholarship or reduced tuition or whatever. Certainly, that's going to play into it. But and like I said, you don't want to totally sell out your mission of your school for the sake of a good football team or whatever. But in order to remain competitive, and I know these folks do, that some of those things are done and will continue to be done for
At
sure.
the end of the day, it's about winning.
Hey, you got to get them dubs. I don't care what anybody tells you. All right, Mr. Varlas, it's been about 20 minutes, believe it or not.
Really?
Man, time flies.
Time flies when
you're sitting next to sexy.
Bringing sexy back.
Hey, John already knows, man. You got to come out more. You got to come back more often. You understand me. You get me.
I do get you.
He doesn't get me.
He doesn't.
Brother.
I will come anytime you guys ask me.
Appreciate you, John.
Appreciate it, John.
Thank you, Richard.
I mean, we always are talking about high school football, but obviously high school basketball is in session, so we have to bring you back when we get even more deeper into this high school basketball season.
Playoffs will be starting up in a couple of weeks, and I'll just leave you guys with this: the large public school tournament, the regional tournament, where you bring the Whitehaven Central Southwind region and the Bartlett Houston region. That's going to be tougher than the state tournament this year.
Ooh, okay. Well, I'm going to be there.
He will definitely be there. And I'm telling you, I will say this, and we've had this conversation. I was a little concerned at some of the high school football because the matchups weren't always great night to night. But high school basketball in this
seems like every night is something.
Totally different.
I'm talking about my first 3 nights that I was covering high school basketball. Every night it was overtime game.
Yeah, and
that was crazy.
And the crowds are finally starting to come back too. The great crowd at the
Whitehaven Central, man, that was incredible.
Great crowd last night at Southwind as well. And that's cool to see, because after COVID things really took a dive, and with ticket prices a lot of people out, but the crowds are coming back. But trust me on this, that region tournament where you bring the suburban region and the city region, that's going to be a war, because only two of those teams can advance.
Man.
Ooh, I cannot wait.